bold recommendation on length of copyright. We were very clear that we didn't want this to be, I'm sorry if this sounds ungracious, merely a discussion among lawyers, although we're very grateful for the distinguished lawyers that we do have present. We wanted obviously to bring other voices to the fore, and a very important voice is that of the writer, the creative writer, the author, and we're very pleased indeed to have here Maggie Gee, novelist. Maggie Gee was in fact a literary scholar herself before she became a full-time writer, so she knows whereof she speaks from the academic side of the fence. She's published many books, 13 books, mainly novels and a collection of short stories, and her recent memoir, My Animal Life, includes a long chapter on the literary and critical marketplace. She's been involved with copyright issues through membership of the Public Lending Right Committee between 2000 and 2007. And of course the PLR, as you may know, is one of those bodies recently abolished in the coalition government's bonfire of the Quangos. Will we still get our little checks, I wonder? She's also been involved with authors' rights in general through the management committee of the Society of Authors. And she was in fact the first female chair, I think I'm right in saying, of the Council of the Royal Society of Literature. She was shortlisted for the Orange Prize and the International Impact Award for her 8th novel, The White Family.
Hello, good evening. Can I just ask for a show of hands for people in the audience whose principal income is from either writing or music or visual arts? Okay, so I have to say it's lovely to see you all, and thank you for inviting us here. But I think we are very much in the minority in this group, and therefore perhaps we're coming at the idea of intellectual property from a very different angle. And I'm hoping to persuade you that we also have something to say in this question. I'd like to just follow on from what Ian has said about PLR to say that the PLR organisation appears to have been abolished, but PLR is an ongoing right, that is the right to be paid 6.3 pence every time one of our books is taken out from public libraries. This right gives rise to an income of between £1,000 and £6,600, that's the cap, for a very significant number of authors, and with the low level of authors' earnings, it's a right we are very, very eager not to lose. And it contributes, I think, to the general sense of anxiety that authors and originators have at the moment with a rapidly changing digital marketplace. So any of you who get a chance in this very informed and intelligent audience, please support PLR. But I want to talk, of course, much more generally about intellectual property. I understand that many of you here work within the university. As I did a very long time ago myself, I wouldn't really call myself a scholar, I just did a PhD. And well, I did a B.Lit before that, so I did that, but I wasn't I don't consider myself to be as scholar as you are. And I understand that there have been some real threats to scholarship and freedom of information due to abuses of the present copyright laws. And I think this was argued very cogently. That was the frame of reference, really, of the British Academy's 2006 report on copyright law. Really, I mean, I think their brief was to look at problems raised by copyright law. However, I think that very brief, perhaps of necessity, led to a certain one-sidedness. One of them in the way in which the commercial, non-commercial distinction, it was both used and in, let me see, Recommendation 3, Clause 2, it was extended rather generously to extend, it was extended to include the rights to fair use of research that was done for the reasonable profits of commercial publishers. It looked to me as though that might have been something added on, because I think the general impression you would get from reading the report was that it was possible to in some way protect the rights of scholars and those within the academy, while possibly not quite so strongly supporting the rights of those outside it. And I would just like to point out, I'm not a non-fiction writer myself, but the non-fiction market in general in this country has really collapsed pretty much over the last 4 or 5 years. Partly, I suppose, because of things like celebrity biography. And it's very possible that a non-fiction writer outside the academy, outside universities, is actually being paid less for their research than somebody who has an academic job or a research grant. So I think what we have to see is that there is a republic of letters here, and the whole republic is impoverished if fair use of quotations of reasonable length and images is not extended to non-academic as well as academic researchers. And I think we have to use the term independent scholars for many of these non-fiction writers, even though they have a commercial publisher. More generally, how do we view the principle of copyright in the new electronic state of play? I think it's very tempting to see freedom as a value which must be upheld at all costs, without seeing that literal financial freedom of access is actually penalising the originators, the writers, the musicians, the visual artists. I am like every other curious, information-hungry human being. I too long for access to books, poems, songs and paintings, and part of me wants it to be as cheap as possible, preferably free, of course. But there is a very different side to this. How can payment for work done be assured for the originators? We must be paid because the desirable aesthetic object represents hours and years of physical labour. Why is it so difficult for the young to understand why they should pay for content? I think it's very clear. The process of acquiring electronic content seems to be as easy as thinking. And human beings have evolved to consider the acquisition of information as a good in itself. Information helps survival. That's an evolutionary truth. The process of copying, transmission and access, once they are reduced to the click of a mouse, it's very hard not to believe that the work of art belongs to everyone as a right. The sheer effortlessness of that procedure. In the context of reading and books, there are particular reasons why people between 15 and 25 think that books are theirs as a right, because they've always been told that reading is a good by anxious parents, by eager teachers, by despairing university lecturers. Everyone tells them they should read more, they must read more. And books are forced upon them by parents, by teachers, by university lecturers. Well, just as that generation are starting to earn money, but before they have actually acquired book buying habits, downloads, either legal and to pay, or free and potentially illegal, are coming on stream, and I think we know which one they are likely to choose. From the point of view of the originators, it's essential that we somehow imaginatively get them to understand that beyond that light, effortless, pleasurable download, there is a very difficult process. There are hours and years of physical work, and there is a material creator who has to pay for their living because nobody else is paying them, and that is the only way that they can earn their living. you may not realise just how poorly paid writers are as a group. To quote from the briefing given by the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society to the Labour Party conference this year, typical income for a professional writer, 1/3 below the national average wage. Earnings of a typical writer steadily deteriorating in real terms. Typical earnings of professional writers between 25 and 34, 5,000 per annum. Fewer than 15% of authors surveyed have actually received payments for online use of their works. So this is not a situation of selfish people wanting to take others' freedom away and holding on grimly to their fat profits. So I think, there's a lot to hope for, but a lot to fear from the release of our work into the current free-for-all of the digital market. I know the unit price of legal downloads and the percentage rate are still finding, the percentage royalty rate for artists are still finding their levels. But if you look at Hilary Mantle's Booker Prize-winning Wolf Hall, the price of a download seems to be between £2.50 and £2.80. On a typical electronic royalty, that would give Hilary 70p profit per copy, whereas a hardback royalty would be between £1.80 and £3.60 per copy. So we have to be sure, looking at that model, that the number of electronic downloads is going to somehow make up for that drop of income. For publishers, it's much more difficult, I think, because, okay, they no longer have to physically produce the books, they no longer have to distribute them or warehouse them, but in that context, what exactly is their function? When Amazon is inviting authors to upload a digital file and receive 70% of the profit, that might look like an attractive model, until you think that actually publishers, good publishers, supply editors, editing, quality control, which is essential, publicists who help get the product to the critics and to the literary, they don't call them gatekeepers, but that gets them the attention that they really need. I don't think we just want an Amazon free-for-all, because it sounds to me like a kind of, well, it sounds to me like everything will sink in the sand in that model. It's fine, I think, for people who can't get published, but it isn't a good alternative for published authors. How do authors feel? Some are hiding their head in the sand. Some of them don't want to think about electronic publishing at all. By contrast, I do feel excited about it. I like the idea that we might be able to evade the big chains and the conservatism of that taste. But I think we've got to look at, always look at the real existence of the author. If we just look at that digital presence, it's very tempting to think of it as something that can't be protected. It can be protected, and it must be protected. If, in a way, you see the download has escaped the physical object of the book, which is easy to protect. It's escaped, and in a way that's great. But I see that download as very like my soul. Excuse me, I know we're in the Royal Society of Science, it's a metaphor. I see it as my soul, and I don't want my soul to be stolen. I want it to be valued and respected, and I want my body to be sustained. I work very hard for 2 or 3 years to give an illusion that a book is easy, but it isn't. We want our labour and our copyright to be respected, and we need enough money to live. Thank you.